That drawing, that original drawing is in the room next to you if you want to. And then I just want to end with the slice porosity block, going back to Levius Woods. Very, very important project for us, 3 million square feet in this amazing town of Chengdu. And right from the beginning, we didn't want to make an object, we wanted to make a space. And we wanted to make that space. And also Chengdu is the oldest city in China with the same name for over 2,000 years. You see this map, a very old map, and none of these cities are in the same place. Chengdu has always been Chengdu. So there's another kind of history. And the building is an exoskeletal concrete frame sliced by the sun. And an idea of an integral urban form, of making this urban space, making a public space with the building, the notion of micro-urbanism, the shops that are in the shopping center below that also open out onto the street and give life to the street. And then these micro-urbanistic buildings within buildings, buildings within buildings. That was the first sketch, of building within building, with 3. I wanted 3. So then we said, what will they be? That's the sunlight slicing. This is the 2 hours of required sunlight in China, slicing, and that gives us 2 hours that we need here. That gives the building its form. These are the actual diagram of the required sunlight. So we just followed it. We just said, okay, the structural concrete frame, that's the load-bearing frame. These are earthquake forces. And then where it's sliced, we turn it into glass. And then there was the idea for the main garden, comes from a poet who lived there in the year 713. This fugitive between the earth and the sky, from the northeast storm-tossed to the southwest, time has left stranded in 3 valleys. So that gave us 3 valleys, and each one of these has a different idea of time. And I won't talk about this, but it's very important. Another professor should give you a class on energy. I think today, more important than many other things that we do as architects. On every project we made in China is almost like Leeds platinum. This is all geothermally heated and cooled, has every possible system that would take another hour to speak about. And there's the public space, and there's Levius Woods' piece, and there's our piece, and Ai Weiwei's piece. And they never realized Ai Weiwei's piece for political reasons. So there was the proposal, and there's Ai Weiwei, there's Levius, there's our piece, and then the building was realized very, in a way, for such a big construction, quite rapidly. And that's the structural frame that you're looking at. There's where the history of the building goes. So when you see the building on the horizon in the city, you see that it's a space and not an object, because it's forming this public space. And this is a piece of a much longer film by Spirit of Space. That's all structural concrete, very thick, with a penetrating white stain. There were 150,000 people came to the opening of the project in November. And there's quite a few good cafes and restaurants around the edges of these ponds. The sort of Fifth Avenue of Chengdu. This one of the fountains has to do with time. This is the Du Fu quote in cast iron. History. The provincial history of Chengdu is projected on the bamboo walls. And there you can see the light pavilion. So this project for Levius was really important. It ends up being the last building that he built, and you see exactly, and there's a wonderful book by Christoph Kompisch, The Light Pavilion, which has just been published by Lars Muller, that goes into more detail. But you can see right from the first sketches, his notion of vectors, the notion of forces, and the notion of, let's say, occupying this carved out space. It's about 4 stories tall. It's engulfing several levels and connecting with different levels of the building. And over a period of about 2 years, Levius and Christoph worked on the development, how the walkways, how you would occupy, exactly how be suspended inside. And then the client tried to push it out of the project because of the budget. So we had a genius moment where I said, hey, wait a minute, that's the light fixture that lights the whole public space. You can't push that out of the project. And that somehow saved that part. And Ai Weiwei, we couldn't argue Ai Weiwei, so they didn't build Ai Weiwei's, but there's just a big hole there where Ai Weiwei's is supposed to be. So then this became sort of more instrumental, as it's going to give light to the space, and it really does light the whole space. It's amazing. And then more models were built, and then the construction, enormous pieces of steel occupying the inside of the lenses. And I went to Chengdu to be sure everything was going correct. So inside of those wonderful, delicate lines of Levius woods is this enormous steel section carrying the load because they're going out from the building, cantilevering, going way out from the facade. So it's not a, you see the walkways there, standing here, you can stand there and walk down those stairs and stand there. And the entire envelope is lined in stainless, polished stainless steel. There you can see it's coming out from the facade a couple, 3 meters. And you walk out from the facade, so you really feel you're outside. That's a construction drawing because the walkway is not in. And here's, standing here in the light pavilion of Levius Woods in Chengdu, in our sliced porosity block. It's an amazing experience. Levius has realized a work that is actually everything he ever drew. Anti-gravitational. The feeling of up is down, the feeling of down is up. It's an amazing piece cut into the side of this building, which when you occupy it, you really understand the work and the sort of feeling, the vision of Levius's work. And I'm really enormously excited that this piece of architecture got realized. So when I was there in November, I realized they had named this building Shiguang, which means time light, or in a way, the Chinese people here will know what that means. It means something like time light transcendent. So they gave it their own name. This is what happens in China. I love it. You see, CCTV is called Da Kucha, big pants. I think he went to, he's probably angry about that. But for us, time light, Shiguang, that's wonderful. I'm very happy with that. And then I thought, just to summarize, this is one complicated idea, but I have this idea that this building, this piece of architecture is way more important, than its size. And here's why. I always loved Sigurd Gideon's book, Space, Time, and Architecture. It's from 1941, and I have a 1941, this is my 1941 edition of Space, Time, and Architecture. Gideon wrote, the four-dimensional space-time creation of architecture, not merely for the eye, but for the entire organism, the experiencing soul. You know, it was like a breakthrough. It was like the extension of space and time, merging and fusing. But what happened? What happened was, you know, complexity and contradiction, you know, everything went backwards. And then we have, 1963, we have the seminal text, Colin Rowe and Robert Slutsky, Transparency, Literal and Phenomenal. It returned the viewer to the static position, the frontal plane, the postmodern period. It returned us to 3 dimensions, took us out of 4 dimensions, returned us to 3 dimensions. But that's not what the physical world is doing. It's actually moving the other direction. So what I think is important about Levius's pavilion is that it's as if, okay, I know he worked in 4 dimensions, always, X, Y, Z, and time. But because he dissolves the axis vertically and horizontally, it seems to me that there's some kind of 5th dimension to this project. And in a way, it begins with the X, Y, Z, and then there's time, but this dissolution of the X, Y, Z because of the way that everything dissolves in all directions, yeah, that's something important, and you have to go in it to see it. And it does light the whole space. And I'll just end with the first quote, but longer. There is no such thing as architecture. What does exist is the spirit of architecture, but it has no presence. What does have presence is a work of architecture. And at best, it must be considered as an offering of architecture itself merely because of the wonder of its beginning. Thank you.